Here's a question. Why become an orientation leader? For some, it's because it's a summer job that bridges one year to the next. For others, it's because they're trying to expand their leadership skills and refine their oratory ability. And for the vanishingly small minority, it's because they love people. But why become an orientation leader during a global pandemic? I became an orientation leader during a global pandemic because I saw it as an opportunity to encourage students during one of the most difficult times of their lives, right before they step into one of the most formative periods of their lives. Okay, here's another question. How do you share a message that's important with someone that doesn't know you? I believe it's a three-step cycle of action: slowing down, stopping, and stepping out. In detail, that looks like slowing down to notice, stopping to listen, and stepping out to understand. So, how do you slow down to notice? The first thing you do is you show people that they are worth slowing down for. This map on the screen behind me is a picture of all the places from which my students called in from, 23 countries around the world. And I love this picture as a representation of the idea that people come into your life from a variety of different places. And speaking metaphorically, that could be emotionally, mentally, socioeconomically. You pick the level of categorization. People come into your life from very different places. So when you slow down to notice, you put your value where people put theirs. During one of my sessions, I had the chance to meet a student that was calling in from India. And this was her story. Her parents had saved up her entire life for her to get the opportunity to study in the US. And she had tried for 3 years unsuccessfully to get a visa to come and study here in the US. And finally, in 2020, her visa got approved. And then the coronavirus hit. The US shut its borders, and ICE mandated that all students on F1 visas that were taking an online course schedule were barred from entry to the United States. So now my student had this conundrum where she had tried for so long to realize this dream, and now it was in her grasp. But this dream that was finally in her grasp was now being precluded by something out of her control. I remember her telling our group how upset she was, how she spent many nights crying and trying to figure out what she could do to avail herself of the situation that she was in. And in that moment, I said to her, I don't have a lot of power, but I will do everything that I can to put you in contact with administrators, to pass on resources so that you can figure out this situation and realize your dream. I put my value where this student put hers. And that's the idea. The most meaningful thing to people is recognizing the significance of something that is important to them. So we've slowed down to notice. Now it's time to stop to listen. And when you do that, it's important to remember that it takes time to articulate matters of the heart. All the students that came into my sessions during the summer came to hear me talk about how to deal with bratty professors, or how to navigate homework, exams, having a social life in college. But I realized that in a Zoom room where all of these students were facing all manner of hardship, this presented a unique opportunity to give them the chance to talk about what they were going through. So right before I went into any of the content that they came in for, I said, let me know what it's like where you're calling in from. How are you handling what's going on around you? And when I posed the question, I was met with silence. Lots of eyes looking back at me, lots of people looking down, people fidgeting nervously. And that silence was 10 seconds, and then it was 15 seconds, and then 20 seconds, and I'm sitting in my chair thinking, okay, I should just move on. I should just move on. And then at 30 seconds, one person speaks up and they talk about what they're going through. And then two more people speak up. And that sets in motion a whole catenation of people being able to talk about what they're going through from just that one person giving them that courage. And it made me think about, as a leader, how often do we fail to wait? How often do we not give people the time to talk about their deepest concerns and the deepest things that they're feeling, because the silence is awkward, because it's uncomfortable? When you give people time to articulate matters of the heart, you can see that it helps to talk about your experiences to understand them. I had another student who was an EMT from Pennsylvania, and he told us a story about how he was working one late evening and an elderly couple called the hospital because the husband wasn't feeling well. So my student gets in an ambulance and drives to their home and picks them up and transports the man to the hospital. And they run some initial tests that are inconclusive. And then they think to run a COVID diagnostic test on him to see if that's what is ailing him. And the test comes back positive. And only an hour later, this man passes away in his hospital room. The next morning, very early in the morning, my student is still working. And the wife calls the hospital because she's not feeling well either. So my student goes in the ambulance to pick her up, drives her to the hospital. Same path is followed. They run some initial tests, inconclusive. They run the COVID test on her, and it comes back positive. And this woman that my student picked up early in the morning passed away 3 hours after her diagnosis in the same room that her husband passed away in the night before. And I'm watching my student talk about this, and I'm watching how he's struggling trying to articulate what he saw. There's filler words in his speech, there's gaps, there's ums and uhs, and I thought, why is that? It's because a lot of times our memories, feelings, and experiences exist in the preconscious stage, the level below our ability to articulate it. And then during the process of verbalization, we're ascribing words to those memories, feelings, and experiences. And in a conversation, when you're talking with somebody, that person is filtering what you say through their subjectivity. And in turn, that can lead to insight and understanding, because that person can ask you questions and show you perspectives you haven't seen before, or they can give you advice that you never thought about. And that's why a lot of times in conversations we have those eureka moments or those moments of clarity, because it helps to talk about your experiences to understand them. Now, stepping out to understand. An important lesson here is that people give you all the right hints to see their worlds. Another thing that I did in my sessions was I would invite my students as an icebreaker to find one item in their house that's most meaningful to them out of everything. And students would bring me laptops they built by themselves. They would bring me trophies. They would bring pictures of family members or memorable vacations. And another part of our training as orientation leaders was when our students would come into the meetings, we were told to notice their backgrounds, their bookshelves or their pictures or whatever may be in their screen, because that would open an avenue towards conversation. And so one of my students during the icebreaker, she was from China. I noticed when she came into the meeting, she had this cute plush elephant on a sill above her desk. And when I told my students to go find their item, she went and pulled this elephant off of that sill and brought it to the camera and said, "This plush elephant was a gift from my mother when I was 6 years old for my birthday, and I've kept it ever since." And I thought, oh, that's amazing. That is so cool. And what I would always do is I would ask my students one question about the item that they presented. So I asked this student, what's your relationship with your mom like? And she looked at me and put her head down for a long time. I asked an innocuous question. I didn't think that it was anything that visceral. And then she looks up and she says, I don't get to see my mom very often. She works day in and day out, trying to support our family, and I never get to see her. And in that moment, I realized that what looked to me as a plush elephant that represented a childhood memory that was cute was actually reminiscent of a relationship with her mother that she did not have, that she could not experience. And that's why I think that a Zoom window is a rough or an interesting metaphor for the personality. Because in someone's Zoom window, you can see things like their background, you can see into their worlds. And in the same way, in real life, when we interact with people, there are things that we can see, their personality, their interests, their hobbies, those things that are ostensibly on the outside. But a lot of times we forget that those things are actually connected to that which we cannot see, that which is deeper and more inward facing. And so if we can ask those kinds of questions and have ears to hear, we can connect with others better. That's why compassion is a bridge out of hardship, because during times of trouble, some people can pass out of those times quicker because they have the resources, they have other opportunities, they have options, they have security. But compassion looks back to see that person that is stuck, that person who is forgotten, that person who is unable to move forward, and compassion makes a way for everyone towards the brighter future. And so in the same way that we can look at other people to understand them better, it's important to look at our own lives and what we go through to extract the meaning from it. Here's the final thought. It's important to ground your hardship in something meaningful. I love this illustration here because there's a person standing in front of a mountain, and I think that's perfectly an example of how when you look at a problem such as it is, it looks insurmountable. But when you can ground that problem in a meaning that is bigger, something that's more compelling, it becomes navigable. So here's a way to look at what you go through in order to take the meaning from it. Ask yourself this question. What could it mean to go through something as the person you are, when it is occurring, for as long as it is happening the way it is happening? It's not that all the answers will come at once, but it's that if you can answer even one part of that question, that's meaning enough to move forward. That illustration on the slide of a ship in a storm. When a ship drops its anchor in the storm, it's not that the ship will stop moving back and forth over the waves. It's not that the ship's sails won't be pelted by the wind anymore. It's that that ship is moored to something greater, and that's meaning. Meaning moors you to something greater so that you can withstand what you have to go through. So finally, if we can learn to understand others better, we can change their worlds. That's the 3-step process. And if we can understand the meaning behind what we go through, we can change ours as well. Thank you.